Right, in this lesson, we're going to learn how to play FMOD events alongside animations in Unity. We're also going to be looking at a new way we can use our event paths to play our events, as well as setting ourselves up for the next lesson, where we'll be taking another look at parameters. So as always, before we dive into any of that, let's take a look at the FMOD event we'll be implementing. So the event we'll be implementing in this episode is a 3D event called Ellen Run, designed to play the sound of a footstep every time the character model of Ellen takes a step as she runs. If I quickly play the event for you, you'll hear a single footstep. If we then click on the user-built parameter called Material, we can see 4 multi-instruments containing audio files that play a single footstep, each for a specific material. Now, if I click on one of these instruments, you can see under the playlist that they've been set to shuffle, meaning that the instrument will randomly select one of these audio files every time this event is played and the parameter is set to the corresponding value. So the idea is that in Unity, we'll call this event to play whenever a step is taken. We'll be checking every frame to see what material the player is currently running on, and update our material parameter to the correct value accordingly, which will change which multi-instrument is heard by the player. So if I change the material parameter to 2 and quickly play the event, we can hear a randomly selected footstep on stone play. Then if we set it to 3, we can hear the sound of someone stepping in a puddle, and then set it to 4 to hear someone running through grass. So when creating this parameter, I made sure under the additional options menu to set hold value during playback to true, so that if the value of the material parameter were to change midway through one of our footsteps being played, the sound wouldn't be interrupted and changed to another, allowing each footstep that is played to finish before the next multi-instrument is triggered. So as you can see, the event itself is quite a simple one. All we need to do is look at how we can detect which material our player is running on in Unity, then play the event when appropriate. So let's jump into Unity and create a script for us to use. So once we're in Unity, we're going to want to navigate ourselves to the FMOD folder where we're creating our scripts, create a new one, and we're going to call this one F_player. This script we'll use to play back any sounds related to our player character. Now, as always, once it's finished compiling, let's drag it over to the object we want to attach it to, which is Ellen. Then let's edit the script to open it up and get started with our footsteps. Right, the first thing we're going to do before we look into changing our parameter and the footstep material sounds is to set up a function to be called whenever the animation of our player running takes a step. So whenever this function is called, it will create an event instance variable and store an instance of our event inside of it, attach the instance to our Ellen game object position in our game world, play our event, and release the instance when the event is finished. Then later we will set it up to change our parameter, but for now let's focus on playing our event. So we're going to create our own custom function by writing void and call it play run event. Then let's add its parameter bracket and give it a body. Now inside the body, let's create our variable by writing fmod.studio.event instance. Let's call it run. Now, normally when declaring an event instance variable outside of a function and inside of the class only, like we normally do at the top of our scripts, we'd have to assign the instance separately within a function. However, because we're declaring our variable inside a function, we can initialize this field and assign an instance to it straight away. So once we've added an equals operator, let's write fmod unity.runtimemanager.create instance, add our brackets and give it the event path, sound effects, Ellen run. So obviously, as you can see, the plus side to creating an event instance variable inside a function is that you can assign an instance of your desired event straight away. However, the downside is that we can't do anything with the run variable outside of the event we declared it in, which is play run event. If, for example, we wanted to tell this event to stop from within another function, say the onDestroy function, we wouldn't be able to access it. But for what we're trying to accomplish, declaring it inside of a function will work quite nicely. So in the next line, we're going to write fmod unity.runtimemanager.attach instance to object. Then in the brackets, give it our event instance variable, give it our transform component of the object that this script will be attached to, which will be the Ellen object. And then let's also write get component rigid body. Then we're going to tell our event to start playing. And then finally, in the last line, we're going to tell our event instance to release once it's finished playing. So what we've done here is set up a function that's specifically designed to act in the same way as a play one-shot command would. So just like a play one-shot command, as soon as this function is called, it will create an instance of our event, position it in our 3D game world, play it, and then destroy the instance once the event is finished. The plus side to creating a one-shot in this way is that we have the ability to control any parameters we create for our event, which is something the play one-shot command and play one-shot attached commands don't allow us to do. So depending on the situation you're in and what it is that you're trying to achieve, it's definitely worth considering which option will be best for you to play your events. Great, now that we've got our functional set up, it's time to save our script and head back into Unity to take a look at our player characters' animations. So now that our function is ready to go, we want to trigger it with one of our animations. To do that, we need to find the run animation inside our assets folder for the Ellen game object. So let's make sure we've got our project tab selected and search through our folders. Let's go 3D game kit, art, animations, animation clips, characters, and then Ellen. And here we can see all of the animations for Ellen. So if we click on one of them randomly and drag up this grey bar here in the inspector tab, we can bring up a window that allows us to preview our animation. Now, if your window is missing a model and instead says no model is available for preview, all you need to do is find the location of the model that is supposed to be used for this animation and drag it into this window, which in our case is the Ellen model. So whilst the animation you wish to preview is still selected, you can go back to the art folder and you can go art, models, characters, Ellen, and then simply drag the model into the animation window. And there you go, just like that. So it's now time for us to find our run animation. If we click on the arrow sitting on top of the Ellen Run Forward FXB file, we can see in total 5 different animations. All of these animations are used in different circumstances when Ellen is made to run by the player. Now, if we click on the 2D option of the preview window and play some of these animations, you can tell by the direction Ellen is facing, as well as the name of the animation itself, that these are each to be used depending on what direction Ellen is facing. So for this lesson, I'm going to call the function when the standard animation for running is called, which is the Ellen Run Forward animation. So with our animation selected, we need to go to the Inspector tab and at the top click Edit, allowing us to make changes to this animation. We can then scroll down and click on the tab called Events. Now it's here that we can create what's called animation events, which are not to be confused with our FMOD events. An animation event can be used to call a function from a script on a specific frame of the animation. They can also pass through integer, float, or string values into those functions to be stored inside of variables and then used for calculations and processing commands. Now in our case, we want to use them to call our play run event function on the frames that Ellen's foot hits the ground. So let's go back to our preview window and let's just adjust the camera, zoom in and rotate it so that we can clearly see when Ellen's feet hit the ground. Then we can drag the cursor along to find when her first foot hits the ground, which is about there. Once we've found the frame where the foot touches the ground, which in our case is frame 43, we can go back to the timeline of our events and click this button here. And now a little mark will appear on the timeline and give us access to these fields below. Now all we have to do is enter the name of the function we want to call in the function field. So for us, it was play run event. Let's then scroll through the timeline again and let's find the next footstep and we'll add one more animation event to it. So it's around about frame 65. We'll do the same thing. In the function field, we'll write play run event. Once we've added all of our events with our functions inside of them, we need to scroll to the bottom and select apply to save all the changes we made to this animation. Once it's finished saving our changes, we can run our scene and test our footsteps. So if we start to run forward now, we can hear that whilst the material of the footsteps hasn't been set properly, our animation event is still playing and our function is working perfectly. Now it's important to note that the run animation is able to call our function because the script we made the function inside of, being the f_player script, is attached to the same game object that uses an animator component, such as this one here, to play this animation. If our script was located on a different object to this one that didn't have this animator component and also wasn't linked to the LN controller, our animation event would not recognize the function we fed it. Now, one other thing we could do with our animation event is path our FMOD event path through it into our function. This will allow us to use the function we created for multiple animations, with each animation being used to play their own FMOD event. So if we go back to the run animation and edit it again, then scroll down back to where our events were created, and then select one of the events, we can pass our event path into our function as a string. So if we click on the FMOD tab at the top and click on Event Browser, find our event, which is the LN run event, and click the copy button, we can then paste it into the field labeled string of both of these animation events. Just like that. Let's then hit apply to save those changes we just made, and then go back into our script to see how we can pass that string data into our function. So before we pass our event path as a string into our function, we need to remove our path from where we created our instance. So let's take this string data and let's quickly remove it. We then need to create a new variable to store our event path inside of. And we're going to do that inside of the function's parameter brackets up here. So as we learnt about in the last lesson, inside these brackets, we're able to create variables, just like how we're able to do in our class at the top of our script, or inside individual functions. Last time we created a reference variable, specifically inside the onTriggerEnter function, but this time we're going to be talking about how we can use value variables inside the parameter brackets of functions we create ourselves, such as this one here, our playRunEvent function. And we're going to be passing values such as strings, floats, booleans, and integers. So obviously we'll be doing this using our animation event we created earlier in a little bit. But first, just to demonstrate how this might look like in code, let's pretend for a second that we only want to play one of our footsteps on the very first frame, and we want to pass our event path into our function for a variable we created in the parameter brackets. So first, what we would do is create our variable in the brackets. Now in our case, the event path is considered string data, so we'll quickly create a string variable and we'll call it event path. Then in the start function, we'd write the name of our function to call it and tell it to run, add its parameter brackets, and then inside the brackets, we're going to pass string data through it as an argument, in the same way we pass through data into one of our FMOD commands as an argument. So obviously we want to pass our event path into it, so let's add that here, and quickly add the quotation marks next to it to send it through as a string. And let's not forget the semicolon at the end. So now, when the first frame is played, the playRunEvent function will be called, and the string data here will be stored inside of the string variable called event path. Now all we need to do is utilize this variable inside of the function itself. So where we would normally write our event path to create an instance of it, we'll instead reference our variable as we know it contains our event path. So we'll write event path, just like that. Now, if we quickly go back to our animation event in Unity and take another look at it, essentially the same thing is happening. When the animation reaches a frame that calls one of our animation events, it will call the playRunEvent function and pass our event path as string data into the variable parameter we created inside of that function. Once it's stored inside the variable, we're able to use it inside our function, just like we've done here. Now in the future, if we were to create a separate FMOD event for a walking animation or for the sound of the player landing on the ground after jumping, for example, we could call the same function, the playRunEvent function, but pass through a different event path for each animation, saving us writing out extra code for each animation and each FMOD event. And there we go. So let's quickly delete the start function and the call to our playRunEvent function, as that was just a demonstration and we won't actually be needing it. Then let's save our script and test the sound of our footsteps one more time in Unity. So if we start running around again, as you can hear, our event path is still being used inside our function, and we can hear the footsteps play each time it's called. And I think with that, we're going to leave this lesson here, as that was quite a lot to take in. Now we know how we can trigger an FMOD event from an animation. We've also talked about C# parameters and how we can use them to pass data of a specific type into a function. In the next lesson, we'll be coming back to this event and this script to see how we can control the material parameter we created in FMOD in the first parameter lesson. As always, you're more than welcome to take a break, you've certainly earned it, and then mess around and practice making your own animation events and function parameters, and see if you can set up some more FMOD events to play alongside other animations in the game kit.